I've been studying spirituality for more than 10 years now, and I first got into spirituality for two main reasons. One reason was ever since from a young age, I was always fascinated by something beyond ideas and concepts that were beyond what the five senses can show us. So I always had an idea or a fascination that something was out there, and I was really fascinated with this idea to understand not only the workings of the universe or anything beyond. And number two was that as I started to grow up, I realized that all my external problems were really a result of my internal state. So I wanted to fix that. I wanted to do what's called shadow work or inner development. And those were the two main reasons why I got into spirituality in the first place. So I came from a Christian household, and as I was growing up, it was always shown to me that the Christian way was the right way and the other ways weren't right. So it was very authoritative, but I guess the people who were teaching me at that time didn't have actually like a strong knowledge of all the other religions to explain to me why Christianity was the right one. It was sort of just like, you need to listen to this because it's the way. And there's no argument about it. There's no two ways about it. So that didn't really sit well with me, and I mainly rejected it growing up throughout my whole childhood. And when I got into college, I dove really deep into Eastern religions. Like Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Taoism, even a little Hinduism. And they really spoke to me because there are sects which are really devout religiously, but there is also a whole way of like Eastern religions where you're more just focused on being mindful, or actually it's like mind and no mind, to realize that you have no mind, to that realize that you have no ego. The ego is just your conditioning. And so all this stuff you can do without having to go into an organized religion. So that really spoke to me because I was like, wow, there's something here, like I felt that there was something special in it, in that like these were ideas of something beyond definitely the five senses, and it in a way did explain the universe, and it really kind of took me by fascination. But the thing was that I kept battling with the idea of the ego, right? So in Buddhism and Zen and Taoism, they talk about the ego as sort of this conditioning that we have as humans as we grow up, and that the ego is not real. And in a way, they talk about suppressing the ego or trying to get past the ego. And it always felt to me like that I was fighting this ego, with these teachings. I felt like it was always like, try to realize that you're more than this ego, right? And so I kept struggling with the ego, but I realized that every time that I would try to negate or suppress the ego, it would come back so much stronger. So it was always a fight of like tension and release, tension and release. And that can be very draining, and it can take a toll on you if you're kind of going from one extreme to the other. And so I dealt with that for years and years, and it kind of went on and off, kind of in waves. Sometimes I would get into it very heavy, but at other times it was just like, this is too much. And I would kind of back off for like a year or maybe half a year or two. And then I discovered Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner was the Austrian mystic. He basically, through his teachings, which are anthroposophy and theosophy, but he also says that his teachings are like handed down from a much more ancient tradition of spiritual science, and that's what he termed it, spiritual science. And he was very precise in the way he spoke and the way he named things. He didn't just name things arbitrarily. Spiritual science is what he said that we need to get back to in our epoch, because our society has now turned away from religion and spirituality, and we now worship science. Anything that natural science, and it gives us a lot, anything that is done through natural science is sort of the end-all be-all nowadays, right? Anything that can't be proven through science, in a way, is looked down upon, or it's not really validated in the mainstream these days, right? Can you prove it? Can you prove it through science? So he named spiritual science that because he was saying that in our day and age, since we're so scientifically minded, we actually have to bring that scientific logic and thinking back into spirituality. Because back then, people were spiritual, but they had a sort of clairvoyance because they hadn't developed the intellect to the point of our materialistic society. So they didn't have the kind of logic that we did, but because they didn't have that intellect developed back then, they had a more clairvoyant, sort of like hazy consciousness, and where they could actually feel the spiritual beings around them more than we could. But since we've gained intellect, we actually have to use that intellect now and discover spirituality again through that materialistic, scientific-minded way of thought. And so he named it spiritual science, and he actually really tried to expound this whole science of spirituality. So he broke it down in a way where a spiritually minded person or a scientifically trained person could go into spirituality again and discover, like, hey, this makes total sense, especially with my training. Like, you can validate this, and you can prove it with the same methods that we prove our natural sciences. So when I discovered this, it was a total game changer. And not only that, but Rudolf Steiner goes back and he explains the whole idea of the being of Christ and what Christ did, Jesus Christ, the being that came into Jesus's body, during the time that he was in the Golgotha and he got crucified. He talks about that as being one of the most significant moments in history because of what Christ did. Not only did he sacrifice himself and his ego, but he also merged with the aura of the earth, and that's all connected to what our epoch is supposed to go through. So since he did that, now we can find Christ through the aura of our earth, which is a spiritual manifestation, and we're supposed to go back to the spiritual, right, through the scientific mind and intellect way of thought. But we also have to come to Christ through him being here in our aura of the earth, and he achieved that through his crucifixion on the physical plane, and now he's on the etheric plane. So this just flipped everything again, because I was kind of getting stuck with the ego and trying to suppress it, or trying to just basically like kill it off in a sense. And that's kind of how I approached Eastern religions. And so there's nothing wrong with any of that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of the religions, but I'm just saying that's how I approached it. And now that I discovered spiritual science and the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, it totally just shifted my perspective to where it sheds new light on everything. And so what I came to realize about spirituality and occult training is that it's really, the whole gist of it is about an inner alignment through your thoughts and your feelings, right? It's not about crazy, mystical, ecstatic states. It's not about seeing trippy demons or spirits or spirit guides. That stuff's more of an effect of developing your spiritual organs. And what spiritual science says, what Rudolf Steiner says, is that the spiritual organs that we have are already within us. They're already there, and they should actually be working But it's the fact that we haven't developed or given the chance for them to develop, that they lay dormant. So the spiritual organs, they're actually already there, right? And so that's a big shift. And he also talks about how when we try to sacrifice the ego, but we haven't developed the ego, that it's actually not worth much. I mean, he gives the comparison, like, think about, okay, you have this person who has just negated and suppressed their ego, and they sacrifice their ego as Christ did. Christ sacrificed his ego for all of humanity. And that's kind of like that's an example of what we should do. This is in spiritual science. This is what Rudolf Steiner says. But he says if you're trying to sacrifice your ego and you haven't developed your ego at all, sacrificing a weak ego is not as worthy, right, as if you were to develop your ego very strongly. And that's the inner alignment through your thoughts and your feelings and occult development. All inner development is development of a strong ego. If you sacrifice a strong ego, that is worth so much more than if you have always just negated everything and had a weak ego to sacrifice. And also, what I've come to realize is that in occult development and inner development, when you develop yourself in one life, which would probably take many, many lives without occult knowledge, when you develop yourself intentionally, it accelerates that development, which was supposed to take probably many lifetimes. And as you do that, you also proportionally accelerate all the life that you're supposed to live in those lifetimes, and you compact it into this one lifetime. So things may seem very crazy at first when you get into occult development. Things come out of the woodworks, like all these things that you didn't know existed in you, or things that you thought you got over. They come back out strong, and it can be overwhelming. But it's good to just remember that because you're developing and you're learning occult knowledge, you're accelerating development, and in that way, you're accelerating your life. The life that's lived, you accelerate everything. What I felt that I did wrong was that when I first got into spirituality, I thought, like, this is great. But I basically, subconsciously, I think what I was trying to do was I didn't want to deal with a lot of the problems of life, and I didn't want to deal with having to do inner development. So I thought I could bypass that with spirituality, right? Like, I was always kind of up against the wall with worldly pursuits. Like, I was like, I don't want to go into the rat race and be, all in on trying to just work for money. I don't want to be like trying to get famous or anything. And I was like, I think I want to get into spirituality because that's going to be way better than all these things. But in a way, like, I still want those things, right? So I was trying to bypass that with spirituality. But when I actually got more and more into spirituality, I realized that you don't bypass anything. You don't bypass life. You don't bypass having to develop your ego, having to go through the hustle of everyday modern contemporary society, because I live in society. I live in a modern society, unless I move to some mountains in the Himalayas. But it made me realize that I need to go through and be in the world, but not of the world, right? As Jesus says in the Bible. And you need to purify your ego and your higher self. You need to develop yourself through living through this life, through experiencing all the chaos of modern society, right? All the struggles of having to, like, keep up in the rat race. You have to go through that to actually develop into a strong ego, which then becomes worthy of sacrificing, right? And I I also tried to access and try to get into this higher self, these higher worlds of mind and spirit with some of my negative baggage, right? I still held on to negative thoughts and feelings, and I tried to bring that with me. And that was one thing that I really did wrong, because like, you can't do that, right? In the spiritual worlds, like those things where in daily life, in normal life, you might have a bad thought, you might have negative thoughts, and they're not so bad, especially if you just keep them to yourself, right? But in the spiritual world, when your physical body is dropped away and it's just all spirit and mind, those things get amplified and they actually become like big sort of spirits or big things, forces that will come back and attack you. So that was one thing that I really felt that I did was like, and I'm working on it. I'm still working on it, right? To this day, I'm still working on the negative baggage that, I carry with me. Even with this YouTube channel, like I definitely want to do it in the service of all of you who are watching, whoever needs it. I want to do it in that service, but there is a part of me that's like, oh, I want to get, I want to get something with this. I want to be, be bigger or be better. And I mean, so I'm purifying myself even now as I do this with you. So I'm working on it. And what I'm doing is what I really like to do, and it's helped a lot through this whole journey, is to integrate daily practices and meditating. So Rudolf Steiner, in his whole like philosophy, he says that like the meditation is going to be your best friend. It's like your hidden sanctuary of the soul, and that is for occult students when they can turn on the inside and develop themselves. Because if you're always just focused on the external world, and you never have that time to sit with yourself, to sit with your thoughts, to sit with your feelings, and to self-examine, self-analyze, self-contemplate. And also there's other ones where you like don't contemplate anything and it's more of like trying to empty. If you never do that, then you're just going to be way too overwhelmed by everything external. You're never going to have that inner dialogue with yourself. And that inner dialogue is actually, it's like turning the lens in, right? Because like right now, when you're awake, when everything's going on, your attention is out there, right? So this is a way to just turn the lens in, and he stresses that a lot. And so that's what I'm doing, daily practices, trying to just bring in a devout sort of attitude to my life in any ways that you can. It's different for everybody, but there are so many different ways you can do it. There's almost like too much. So it's like, it's almost at this point, it's trying to pick which one and to do it consistently, but whichever one works for you. And so I have 7 principles from Rudolf Steiner, and these 7 principles are very important, and I would not continue to do occult work or to do spiritual work, inner development, without these 7 principles. Number 1, complete physical and mental health. You must try your best to stay healthy, both physically and mentally, because as occult development, as you gain occult and you develop in occult development, you're going to be held back by your physical health. If you're like sick and you're ill and your body is, if it's in a bad state, that's going to affect your mind, and your mind, your thoughts and your feelings, it's going to affect all of that. So it's like one big system that you need every part running good for the whole system to run good. So above all else, like try to maintain a good physical and mental health, right? Mental health in terms of like, you don't think very sadistic thoughts, right? That's mental health. Like you have positive thoughts, you have normal normal, logical thinking also. If you're illogical and you're always blaming somebody, or you just have these extreme thoughts, that's kind of like what you have to look out for. And so that's number one. Number two, to feel yourself as part of the whole always. And it's like, this is very, very important, because as humans, we're ego driven, we're individualistic, we have a personality, we say I, and I say I because I am not you and you are not me. But what you have to realize is that the real nature of things is that you are me and I am you, and we are all one in this world together. And that makes all the difference, because you have to have that kind of mentality and feeling. It develops into a feeling slowly, I think, because the idea, the concept of it is kind of easier to grasp. But when you really feel that you're a part of the whole, everything changes, right? The way that you do things, like what you do, how you do it, because you realize that if someone, maybe someone is like a really bad person, or they do something bad to you, instead of getting mad at that person, which you probably have the right to get mad at them, you realize, hey, like, we are the same person. Maybe they didn't have the good upbringing I had, and so they're this way because of that. And I'm so lucky because I had this upbringing that I see that that's wrong. And that shifts everything, right? And that now you look at him and you love with love, like you kind of actually care about why he's acting, why he or she is acting out that way. You shift the whole thing, rather than just to criticize and judge, right? So that's number two, to feel yourself as part of the whole. Number three, to realize the significance of your inner thoughts and emotions. To realize that thoughts and emotions in yourself are just as real. They have just as much reality as external actions. So as much as I wouldn't go up and hit somebody in the face, because that's obviously bad, you have to come to realize that harboring bad thoughts and emotions is basically doing that in the spiritual world, right? So you have to come to this realization, and it's like you have to constantly be on guard, or at least I do. It's like a constant sort of, you're constantly watching, and you have to do this sort of like inner, outer. But I think a lot of times it's easy to slip up, because we're not so used to being like managing those inner thoughts and emotions all the time, right? To have that awareness all the time is what's hard. Yeah, you can have it for short bursts at a time, but sometimes you just, life happens and you slip. Someone does something and pisses you off, and there you go, right? So to realize the significance of thoughts and emotions as if they had the same reality as external actions. That's number three. So there's 7 of these. Number 4 is really related to the third one, and that's to realize that reality within is actually the true nature, more so than what's without, right? What's within is more real than what's without. The internal is more real than what's external. And when you begin to think like that, because what the outer external manifestation is, what materiality is really just the manifestation of spirit, right? And we should go back to spirit. Spirit is what we're going back to, and we have to realize it, though, within this materiality. And that's the whole game, that's the whole sacrifice, is like, can you get to a point where you can really live from within? And then at that point, you're still living in the without. You're still living out here. But can you shift your perspective and realize that what's in here is more real than what's out there? Because this is all Maya, right? This is physicality. It's dead. It's dead because it will eventually die. So it already has the seeds of death in it. But what's within your soul, it's eternal. It will go through this, And pretty soon, span of a life, you won't have a physical body, but you'll still have a soul, right? And that soul will go on a sojourn to its next incarnation, right? So to realize that is number 4. What's within is more real than what's without. Number 5 is basically steadfastness. And steadfastness means that when you come up with a decision, when you make a decision to do something, you hold on to that decision to do that thing. If you felt that it was the right thing to do and you make the decision to do it, don't waver. Because by doing so, you develop a strong will. You develop a force in you that says, I won't give up because there's no reason to give up, right? If I fail, it's an external world thing, right? But if I never give up inside and I keep going, then I develop what's inside. I develop that inner force, right? You can lose as many times as possible on the outside, and it shouldn't affect your state on the inside to want to do that thing, as long as it's the right thing to do, right? And so it should, and being able and doing things that you decide to do should be out of a longing for your soul versus a craving. Craving is basically self-serving, and it's serving the external body. It's the opposite of inner development, because you're satisfying the external body by your craving. So longing versus craving. And basically, when you act out of longing, you're acting out of love, right? Because only by acting out of love and having the love to act out for humanity will you ever get past all the struggles and obstacles on the way of occult development. If you're self-serving, if you're selfish in this, and that's your main drive, you're not going to get very far in inner development, occult development. You're not going to get very far, as paradoxical as that seems, because you have to act out of love, right? And the 6th one, so that's number 5 is steadfastness. The 6th one is gratitude. And gratitude, we must, whatever position you're in, everybody has their struggles, but whatever position you're in, you got to be grateful for what you have, right? And just having that thought and having that feeling inside. Remember, it's always what's within, right? It's the reality within is more so than what's without. So although you may have a bad situation on the outside, if you can still be grateful on the inside, you gain even more force by doing that, right? If everything's good on the outside and you're grateful on the inside, great. But if you have stuff, a bad outer situation and you're still grateful on the inside, then you really gain a lot from that, and you really have inner wealth from that. Because as you know, it takes a lot for us to be here, right? I mean, we think we're just born and, parents just have us and whatever, it's for free, right? And it's not for free, because it took many, many incarnations to get here. It took the work of different spiritual beings to help us develop into this one incarnation that we are now. And you must take this incarnation, you must take every incarnation with the utmost significance, because it is very significant in every way. And to be grateful for all that, because you have the opportunity, you are here now to do the mission, and that's a once in a lifetime opportunity, not just externally, but eternally in the soul. This is part of your schooling, and you should be honored to work on yourself through this life if you have the ability to do so. And you must be grateful for that. And if you hold these feelings of gratefulness every day in your heart, that will develop into a very, very strong force. That was number 6, gratitude. Number 7 is basically to understand as much as you can about life. Never turn away from life, okay? I know some of the spiritual teachings is telling you like to, forget outer life. All that stuff is nonsense. Go meditate in a cave or something. Like that was an old way of going about it, because nowadays we live in modern society, most of us. And so you have to understand life. You have to get to really know life, right? But you get to know life under all these conditions that I mentioned. Be in the world, but not of the world. And that's basically the seventh condition, is to appreciate and live and love life under these seven conditions. All right. I hope that was helpful. This one was kind of more of just an improv, kind of just sharing my journey and to give you these seven principles, which I found in Rudolf Steiner's book, Knowledge of Higher Worlds. So I'll also link a title to that book at the end. Hope you like this one. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching, and until next time.